What I see so much with people starting up a new business and being in that micro business space and wanting to grow and wanting to scale and wanting to get out of the, day-to-day grind and the day-to-day work, what I see is that they get distracted. They get overwhelmed. They get into the chaos and they can't really pull a direction together. And oftentimes that's when their faith, no matter how solid it is, kind of takes a back seat. And oftentimes that's when their life takes a back seat. They get involved in their business and their personal life goes to pot. Their relationships go down. Divorces happen. Marriage troubles ensue. Families get broken up. All those types of things happen. And this is so symptomatic in the world right now that I feel like this message needs to get out. This is the session on the book, The Power of Aligning Your Faith in Business. This was released on April 7th. It was an Amazon #1 bestseller, and it was a bestseller in the business ethics category, which I thought was really kind of an interesting category. It was also #1 in 3 or 4 hot new release categories, including Christian living, Christian leadership, and definitely in the business ethics as well. And let's see, it was in the top 100, which technically makes it a bestseller on Amazon for whatever good that is, in probably about another 10 or so categories. I didn't really count all of those once I hit the #1 bestseller, so and stay on top of all of those. So anyway, so it did get some publicity, and I'm very proud of the book. I think there was a lot of good information that went into the book. So that's where I am on that. Let's see. So the plan for today is basically to just kind of walk through the book and talk about what's in the book at a high level. And then we'll dive into deep places as we go, if it makes sense. If you've got some place in the book that you're really curious about, or you've looked at the table of contents or whatever, and you say, man, I really wonder what he was thinking when he wrote this chapter or this appendix or whatever. You're welcome to put that in, and we'll do that one out of order, so to speak. Otherwise, we'll just kind of start at the top and walk through. I do want to start with, why did I write this book? I mean, this is kind of like my life's work. I've been leading up to this over my lifetime here, so to speak, especially my coaching lifetime. And why did I write this? It's really comes down to the fact that I've been doing this coaching business for, I guess, 17 years now. 15 years. 15 years. 2011 was when I actually started uh, the business as a business. I actually had a prior business that started in 2009, where I was doing some assessments and things like that. So I guess you could say 17 years. And in that time, I've seen a lot of coaches come and go. I've seen a lot of uh, different models, of different ways of doing things and things like that. And as I was going through some rebranding a couple of years ago, I started to realize I actually have something that is fairly unique out in the world. I haven't seen anybody else put together the system that I've put together here. And while I don't know that it's going to be earth-shaking or totally revolutionary or anything, I think it makes sense for a lot of people. And so the book started kind of as stories of people that I'd worked with. Um, I've I've pulled together 4 particular stories. One is Sam, and in the book she's just identified as Sam. She's on this call as Sam Morrison Wilson, and I can provide ways for you to contact her if you're interested. But Sam was actually one of my first clients that really started me down this road of putting together a repeatable system. And so we've got lots of stories between Sam and myself. She became my coaching client. She started a VA firm. I became her VA client. And we've just been good friends and co-clients and everything for several years. And we've now actually gone out and got a go high level agency so that we can put CRMs together for people and really accelerate what our people can do, what our clients can do together. And so, it's certainly we're friends, we're co-workers, we're business partners, we're clients of each other. So we have a really good relationship. And so Sam's story was one of the stories that was in the book. But then there was a story from John, and there was a story from David Smith. David was actually my first client. He was one of the ones that really believed in me to start with. He had seen me in some volunteer roles and things like that, and had just really, uh, I guess, he enjoyed being around me and wanted to support me in the coaching journey. And I really appreciate his help and his support. And so while he hasn't been a client the whole time, he was my first client in 2011. And then there was Andrew and Marissa. And if you read the story in the book about Andrew and Marissa, young couple, just starting out, I actually gifted them a big piece of what I do as a wedding gift. And they have taken it and run with it. And I'm really proud of what they've put together over the years. Now they've got a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old or something like that, and they're just doing very well. And I'm just proud to have been part of their life as part of that. So that's where the stories kind of came from. And in pulling together the stories, I realized I actually have some good frameworks here. These frameworks are repeatable. I've been using them with multiple people. And it's just one of those things that it's like, I think this is worthwhile. And the more I wrote about it, and the more I put it together, it's like, this is definitely worthwhile. So the why really got back down to God has put in me a calling to serve Christian business owners, particularly. I'm drawn towards the smaller business owners. So I'm going to call those micro business owners. I'm saying a micro business is something with probably 10 or less employees. Solopreneurs are quite welcome. I've been through the solopreneur journey multiple times myself. And so I really have a heart for those people. And so I wanted to serve those people. But what I see so much with people starting up a new business and being in that micro business space and wanting to grow and wanting to scale and wanting to get out of the, day-to-day grind and the day-to-day work, what I see is that they get distracted. They get overwhelmed. They get into the chaos and they can't really pull a direction together. And oftentimes that's when their faith, no matter how solid it is, kind of takes a back seat. And oftentimes that's when their life takes a back seat. They get involved in their business and their personal life goes to pot. Their relationships go down. Divorces happen. Marriage troubles ensue. Families get broken up. All those types of things happen. And this is so symptomatic in the world right now that I feel like this message needs to get out. I'm not saying this is going to solve all the cures, but it'll solve some of them. So that's really the why behind this. And what I actually talk about in one of the first chapters is the fact that there's separate worlds, and this cover indicates that with the separate worlds. There's the faith side on one side, and there's the business side on the other side, and there's this big divide. And sometimes that divide is super big. Sometimes it's just a little crack. Um, and sometimes the divide is I like to say there's always a bell curve, right? So, on one end of the bell curve, what I would call the left end of the bell curve is the people that are Christian, they go to church on Sunday, but God's not really a part of their week for the rest of the week. And we've all seen those people, and that's okay. But some people just aren't that spiritual during the week or whatever. But through all the stuff that I've been through, bringing it together and bringing the faith and the business together, and was really impacted by Kim Avery with her book, The Prayer-Powered Entrepreneur. And that was a way to bring your business and your faith together, a way to bring everything together. And I like to use her example. Let's say that for some reason you're in the financial industry, right? And you get a call out of the blue someday, and Warren Buffett is on the phone and he's saying, Dale, I've seen what you've done and I want to make myself available to you. I want to be able there to be there and answer any questions. And so I'm going to come and actually hang out with you for a week, right? And Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to be right there in the office with you. And you come in on Monday morning and you give Warren Buffett a high five and you say, I'm so glad you're here. And then you turn to your computer and you start working away and you get to these financial issues and you just make the decision and go. And you never turn to Warren Buffett. You never turn to Warren Buffett and you never say, hey, Warren, what do you think about this? What's your opinion on this question or whatever? And at the end of the day, you say, Warren, that was a great day. And you give him a high five and you do that again. What was the use? What was the actual benefit of having that there, right? And yet we have God on our side. And God is so much more powerful and so much more wise than Warren Buffett. And how much do we actually turn to God day by day, minute by minute, and say, hey, God, I'm really struggling with this. How do I do this? How do I get through this? Hey, God, I've got a fork in the road here. Which way do I go? If you just even just pause for a second and ask those questions and say, hey, hey, God, what about this? And just take a minute to pause and reflect. You may not get any answer. You may have to make the answer yourself anyway. You may have to make a decision, but you might get a nudge. You might get a nudge that says, pause. That's not a decision you need to make right now. You may get a nudge that says, oh, go this way, not that way. You know, how about doing that? Give it a try. I mean, that's really what this is all about, right? And so getting back to the bell curve, uh, on one end of the spectrum, like I said, there's those people that have church on Sunday and, God's not a part of their week the rest of the week. Even further out on that left-hand end is the people that don't even go to church on Sunday, but they claim they're Christian, right? But then there's always the other side of the bell curve as well. There's the right-hand side of the bell curve. And I don't want to ignore those. Those are the people that are so spiritual and so into God and so making all the God decisions that they never actually get a business built. I've seen these people. Matter of fact, and if anything, I've been on that side. God's going to take care of me. God's going to bring the clients to me that I need. God's going to do these things. Well, maybe what God's telling you when you don't have enough clients is maybe you need to do some marketing, or maybe you need to plug into some of the wisdom that's other godly people have out there for you. Maybe you need to get involved in some kind of mastermind or some kind of growth issue or something like that. I'm not saying that there's an answer for any of these, but I'm saying that there are answers out there. And I've seen so many people that are on that right outside of the spectrum, and they don't actually think about the fact that if they build a business that can take them further forward, that can reduce their stress, reduce their um, uh, lack of peace, their lack of joy, by bringing in a consistent, repeatable income through a business. If you're not going to do that, why are you in business at all? Why not just claim you're in ministry and go do ministry, you know, and, take some of the ministry models. Okay. There's people that go overseas or whatever, they raise support. Well, maybe you need to start learning how to raise support. So figure out what model works for you and go forward with it at that point. So um, anyway, I mentioned the stuff about Kim Avery. I was so honored and uh, so overjoyed, really, when Kim said that she would write the foreword to the book. I was just so glad and so impressed that she did that, and I thank her so much for doing that. So first thing on the table of contents is the foreword by Kim Avery, and the second thing is the author's introduction, built for more than this. And this gives you a little piece of my story about how I was doing all the right things or what felt like all the right things, but nothing was fitting together. And this was really the period from after the coaching business had started. Probably most of you know that I had a 10-year journey to get out of IT and fully into coaching. It was a 5-year journey where I was still working full-time in IT and trying to build up some coaching, and then a 5-year journey where I was part-time in IT and then full-time, and what I would consider full-time in coaching. Um, so that was kind of the journey. But it was especially in that second half of that journey, that second 5-year period, that I really got to the point that it was like I was trying these things. I was trying the Clifton Strengths, and I was trying setting up a convene group, and I was doing the normal coaching and such like that. And it felt like everything was the right thing. It felt like everything was working, but it didn't feel like nothing was really sparking. Nothing was really pulling it together. And then, and I've mentioned Sam earlier in this conversation. When Sam went through the StrengthsFinder process, which I'm now calling Revealing Strengths and Identity, when she went through that process, it really did start to consolidate the fact that I had some frameworks that were pretty special. And so that's really what this came down to. I'm going to just do a quick pause here and say, welcome, Mike Henry. This is being recorded. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat or whatever. If you want to make sure you don't accidentally show up, just stay muted or whatever, and everything should work fine. So uh, anyway, back to the ramble here. Back to the discussion. So we've talked about the foreword and the author's introduction. Chapter 1 is really the problem that nobody's talking about, and I've already laid that out a little bit earlier in this thing. There's separate worlds out there, and that's really what the chapter 1 is about. And then chapter 2 gets into, it's titled "The Power of Alignment is Believable," and this is where I start talking about the understanding your wiring. I really do believe that every person is gifted by God in different ways. Okay. And in particular, I like to say it this way. Every Christian has a general identity as a son or daughter of God. Okay. They have a general command. Go out into the world and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Okay. And they have a general, sorry, I did that wrong, didn't I? That's the Great Commission. So that's the mission. So let me back up and do these in order. Then everybody has all Christians have a general identity as a son or daughter of God. All Christians have a general command: love God and love others as yourself. And all Christians have a general mission, which is go forth into the world and baptize and baptize people in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? So those are general. If you're a Christian, you're supposed to do those three things, okay? But I believe everybody is created uniquely. And in particular, Psalm 113, um, 119, I just blanked on the Psalm. Uh, uh, Psalm 119, verse 13, Psalm 113, verse 19. No, it's verse 13 and 14. Um, God knit you together in your mother's womb, uh, and he put you together uniquely. He created you uniquely. And so I use the term wiring. I've got something of an engineering background. I've got an IT background. Wiring speaks to me. And so God wired you together with your unique gifts and talents. Romans 11:29, for the gifts and talents of God are irrevocable. That means that they're there. He's not going to take them away. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to discover them on your own or discover them without doing a little bit of work. Sometimes that's a lot of work. That's what I've seen more common is that you have to do a lot of work, a lot of digging into your gifts and talents. How do you bring those all together? All that sort of stuff. Um, so, uh, so because we all are unique, we have a unique identity. Not only are we a son or daughter of the King, but we have something unique about us. For me, the way I say it is I am a loved and complete child of the one true King. That's how I say it. We all have a command. Not only are we supposed to go love God and love others as ourselves, but what are we supposed to do in particular? Okay. And I talk about that a little bit later. And then we all have a mission. And the general mission is go out into the world, make disciples, and baptize them, and teach them to obey everything that I've commanded. What is your unique mission? What are you called to do? What thing does God have planned for you to do that is unique to you? He's got something that is unique to you. And if you don't do it, it's not like the plan is going to fall apart, but it's not going to get done in the manner and time that you could bring to it. It doesn't have your special sauce. Okay. And I always like to use that term special sauce. Special sauce is how does God show up through you in your world? And so I talk about purpose being something meaningful, something that I want to achieve. I have a purpose for this week to get 3 things off my to-do list, 3 big things that have been on there for a while. But then that's not my divine purpose. My divine purpose is really the mission and commandment that God has put into my life, the thing that I'm working on towards my whole life. I believe my commandment is to leave the best legacy that I can leave. And I use legacy in a very precise term. The legacy is a really great story. I think we all want to leave a legacy. We all want to leave a good legacy. Okay. But what does it come down to? What does that mean? And I've heard a clarifying question that I think is really valuable. What's the difference between an inheritance and a legacy? I mean, have you ever thought about that? What's an inheritance? What's a legacy? Well, I think of it this way. An inheritance is something you leave to someone. Could be money, could be property, could be land, could be family wisdom, whatever. But it's something you leave to them. Whereas a legacy is something you leave in someone. You left a core value. You left um, a value, a propensity for honesty or a propensity for integrity, or you left the that fact that family sticks together, or you left the fact that businesses shouldn't cheat people, or whatever. You left something in somebody. So an inheritance is what you leave to someone. A legacy is what you leave in someone. When you think about it that way, and it's actually on the very first page of the book where I talk about, I have a to and a from, and then I have the question right there underneath it. What's the difference between an inheritance and a legacy? I think it's that important. So then the power of alignment is believable, chapter 2. That really gets into the 4 people that I talked about, the 4 stories. Uh, the God designed each of us uniquely. This is how people reacted to the frameworks that I was teaching them at the time. So it's got John and Sam and David, and it's got Andrew and Marissa in there. And so what does that all come down to? It comes down to practical power of alignment. Okay. So the next chapter, chapter 3, I really put a little bit of time into these chapter titles and subtitles that we look over the book. I hope you realize that. Chapter 3 is the chicken or the egg. Which comes first? And so the subtitle of the chapter is First Thing First. Uh, and this chapter is really taking some of the groundwork from chapters 1 and 2 and bringing in some of the steps that I went through. I talk about my own journey here. I talk about the fact that I had the chunk title is A Successful Vision Ends in Failure. I was focused on business success. I did not see the train coming. And this was, I was part of a startup company back in 2000, January 2000, in the tech industry. Can you say bad timing? January 2000 was not a time to be starting a tech company. This was for all of those young whippersnappers that don't remember that time. This was the dot bomb. The dot com had been in the late 90s, and the dot bomb was when it all imploded in 2000, 2001. But interestingly enough, we put this company together and we actually did pretty well. We hit number 10 on the Entrepreneurs fastest growing top 100 companies. And then 2 years later in 2002, we hit number 23. And I actually think that was a bigger accomplishment than the first one because going from zero to something is a lot easier than going from something to something bigger. And that's what we did in 2002. But that company basically all fell apart. We really had no relationships with each other. We were just kind of pursuing the same dream, but not really. We were going after wealth instead of, building something lasting. And so in 2004, it all fell apart and we had shut everything down to avoid bankruptcy. And then turned around and the next chunk is a vision rooted in heart yields lasting impact. And it talks about whole person leadership produces whole team results. So basically, I had a chance in 2005 to go do some assessments for a company. And that led in 2006 to getting selected to do managed services for that company down in Houston. And that 2006, when they did that, I had no idea that it would turn out this way. But we went annual in 2007 for $1 million a year. And the company I was working for had actually done a total revenue of $12 million the previous year. So having one new client come in at $1 million a year really impacted the bottom line. And they were able to allow me to set up the team the way I wanted to set it up, which was really nice. And I set it up on biblical principles, and I set it up on relational values, and I set it up on taking care of each other and being part of a uh, really important, tried to keep a vision out there. Hey, we're going to build something lasting and everything. And what really boiled down to is in 2014, I was removed as director, and in 2016, I went to part-time. So I wasn't directly responsible for that client anymore. But it was really interesting because from 2016 to 2021, I was basically helping the leader of that organization that was managing that team. I was helping him with all the relational issues that came up, including with the client and whatever. And so when I left when I left the company in 2021, I looked back and I said, we have been at this client for 15 years doing managed services. And I did a look in the tech industry. There's not very many companies, especially if you're not like an IBM or you know, one of the big consulting companies. And we weren't. We were just a little regional consulting company. That there's not very many that have a managed services contract that goes more than 10 years at the most. And so I was really proud of that. That's really the thing I'm most proud about in my IT career was that putting that team together and making it work for that long. And then the next chunk in chapter 3 is proof in the patterns. I'll talk about some things like Costco and Southwest Airline, and I'll talk about some not as well known ones that fall apart. And I compare and contrast some of that stuff. And then the next chunk, what separates your heart from your business? And I'm just saying, if you don't bring your heart and your whole body person into this, you're trying to use your business brain, but you're not talking to Warren Buffett when he's sitting next to you, or you're not talking to God, you're not going to make the right decisions. So hope that makes sense to everybody so far. I'm going to take a little bit of a pause and just check everything in the chat. Okay. Um, so chapter 4, the destination that changes everything. Okay. And this is where uh, I put a label, a title, a name on what are we really after? Okay. And I would claim that almost everybody in business is really looking for three things. Okay. And those three things I would say would be peace, joy, and direction. And nobody will say that right off the bat. Everybody will say, well, I'm looking for profit, or I'm looking for the next big client, or I'm looking for whatever. But you start peeling back the layers, and what the layers get to then is that the layers will reveal that what is underneath what they're saying they want is they're saying, I really want peace or joy or direction. I want to be able to say that I've got enough time and capabilities and whatever that I'm not stressed. I can be in a place where I can make good decisions. I want to be in a place where I know that things are right. I want to have that joy. And I want to know that I'm valued and loved, and I really feel it. I embrace it, and I want to know what's my next step. I want to have the clarity. A lot of people will ask for clarity, but what I think they really want is they want a direction. I always go back to the Mother Teresa story about, the guy looked up Mother Teresa and tracked her down, got to her and said, Mother Teresa, I'd really like for you to pray for clarity. And she said, nope, I'm not going to pray for clarity. If you have clarity, you don't have faith. And so I will pray for you for faith. Okay. Well, it's a cool story. It's a nice story. But what I really believe that basically comes down to lots of times is that what we want is not necessarily clarity in all pieces, but we want clarity on the next step. We want clarity on the direction. We want clarity on, do I take this step or that step? And it's worthwhile to ask for clarity on those things. But asking for clarity about the end of the journey is probably an overreach. You're probably not going to get that. And so if you actually measure your amount of joy, your amount of peace, and your amount of direction as you're going through this thing, I think you can get a lot closer to what are you really looking for. And uh, so chapter 4 is titled The Destination That Changes Everything. Subtitle, Arriving at Complete and Aligned Success. So I always had the problem as a coach. How do I coach people to a particular result? You know, some person A is not going to want the same result as person B. They're not trying to get to the same place. Everybody's place is unique because everybody's journey is unique because everybody is unique. You know, if we're starting with that, then how do you set a destination? But if you don't set a destination that I can write about, I can't really write a lot. So I'm caught in a catch-22 at this point, right? And so I cheated. I put together a target. The target is complete and aligned success. Okay. Well, we all want success, right? But start with the last one. You know, we want to be successful. We don't want to be failure. We don't want to, look back at the end of our life and say, well, our legacy is just nothing. It isn't really building anything worthwhile. So, okay, if it's not building anything worthwhile, why are we doing it? Why are we putting our heart and soul and sweat and equity and time and money into it? You know, that's one of the classic coaching questions that, I think everybody's familiar with. Well, if time, health, energy, and money were not a problem, what would you do? Most people say, I'd go relax on the beach. Well, you'd probably only do that for a little bit, you know, or, think about all the people that are retiring. Okay. I'm going to retire so I can play golf. Well, there's only so much golf you can play, especially when your body's wearing out on you. So how does that do it? So you need to think about the long-term side of things. And so success, we all want success. Well, I claim that you also have to have aligned success. If you're not aligned within yourself, if you haven't brought your personal, your professional, your spiritual all together, if you haven't brought your relationships and your self-identity and what God wants you to do, if you haven't brought that all together, you're not aligned. And so you got to get those in alignment. And by alignment doesn't mean that it has to all be equal. But it does mean that it's got to have, because you have to be able to allocate them, right? You have to have a percentage of time for things that are related to your personal life and your family life and your spiritual life and your church life and all that. So how do you balance all these? What does alignment mean for you? And then I felt like aligned success just wasn't quite enough. So I talked about complete and aligned success. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in Appendix 3 at this point, complete. So there's this Greek word, Teleios, Teleios, Teleios. And this Greek word is like many Greek words and like many Hebrew words that when you start unpacking the Bible and start unpacking all these things, you put all these together and you go, oh, wow, I never really realized that that really meant that. And so Teleios was one of those words. I was first exposed to Teleios, and I talk about this in Appendix 3, which is about Teleios. I was first exposed to Teleios when somebody said, Dale, you need to go find this book called The Teleios Man. And I said, well, what does that mean? And looked it up, and turns out that the book's no longer in print. And so what the guy has done, and I forget the author, I've got him in chapter 3 there. But what he's done is he's revised it, and he's put out The Complete Man. And I know there's a couple of people on the call here that really know what Teleios means, so I'm just hitting the high level cover of it. But Teleios really is this Greek word that it's used in the Bible lots of times as perfect. And in particular, Matthew 5:48, I believe it is. I'm doing all these verses from memory, so I may be off on some of them. But Matthew chapter 5, it says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And I don't know about you, but that verse always stuck out to me and said, how can I do that? How can I as a human be perfect as God, who is the Father and Creator and perfection embodied? How can I be perfect like He's perfect? Well, that word perfect is that word teleos. And I would argue that a better a better translation of that word would uh, be mature, be whole, be complete, as your heavenly Father is whole, mature, and complete. And so complete in this sense doesn't mean I'm never going to make a mistake, which is what most Americans think of when they hear the term be perfect. But it means you have everything that you need to make the right decisions, to move forward, to start growing, to be an adult in today's vernacular a little bit. Be mature. Uh, put down the childish things and take up the good things that the Father has blessed you with. So that's kind of the thumbnail description of Teleios there. And so when I heard that, and if you remember, I said my identity phrase is loved and complete, child of the one true King. I actually came up with that back in, I think, 2017. And it's like, where did that come from? How did that happen way back then? And it's now cycling around. Well, God doesn't waste anything, right? And so when I heard Teleios and I heard complete and all that, it was like, oh, he's been telling me this all along, you know. So I just find that really interesting. So complete and aligned success. I would argue that's the destination that we're all actively trying to go to. Uh, the chunks here, how will you know it when you see it? So you have to be able to recognize completeness, aligned success. How can you tell when you're on the right path? You watch for the signs. It's easy to see when you ask the right questions. And as I say in here, it's extremely and uniquely personal. I can't tell you what those right questions are, but I can give you some general questions that you can start getting down to and really nailing them down. And it's easy to start where you are, what you do first and what you see last. So that takes us through chapter 4. And I see that we're quite a ways into this, and I want to just pause, and we may have to come back and do a second part here. But at this point, there's 3 more chapters left. There's plenty of more things I can talk about here, and I don't like to bore people. And so I'd like to basically just pause and to say, you know, what did let's just open it up for a little bit of discussion here in the last few minutes that we got before the top of the hour, and just say, what have you got? Have you learned anything from my talk here today? Have you learned anything from my rambling? What is it you've learned? What would you have liked to have seen that I didn't get up to or didn't get to today? So I may do a part 2 of this at some point, maybe in the next week or so, but I'm not going to guarantee it either.